For centuries, it was one of the most brutal and profitable systems in human history. Millions of people were bought, sold, and treated as property. But in the 19th century, something extraordinary happened. Slavery was abolished, and the nation that led the charge. Britain. Yes, the same Britain that had been one of the largest slave-trading nations in the world. So why did Britain turn against slavery? Why did it fight so fiercely to end it, not just at home, but across the globe? Today, we are answering that question. We will explore the economic, geopolitical, domestic political, and religious motives behind Britain's abolition of slavery, and why this story matters to all of us. Let's dive in. Let us start with the money. Because let us be honest, when it comes to big historical shifts, economics is almost always a driving force. By the early 19th century, Britain was in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. Factories were popping up everywhere, and machines were replacing human labor. This was a game changer. Machines could produce goods faster and cheaper than enslaved labor. Industries like textiles no longer needed raw materials from slave plantations as much as they needed markets to sell their finished products. At the same time, the rise of wage labor was more efficient than maintaining enslaved workers who required food, shelter, and oversight. And let us not forget the sugar and tobacco industries, which relied heavily on slavery, were becoming less profitable. Meanwhile, new industries like manufacturing and finance were booming. So in short, slavery was no longer the backbone of the British economy. Abolishing it did not just align with moral principles, it made economic sense. Now let's talk about power. Because Britain did not just abolish slavery out of the goodness of its heart, it also saw abolition as a way to weaken its rivals. France and Spain, for example, were still heavily reliant on slavery. France used enslaved labor in its sugar plantations in the Caribbean, while Spain depended on slavery in places like Cuba. By abolishing the slave trade and pressuring other nations to do the same, Britain damaged their economies. And here is the kicker. Britain's Royal Navy enforced anti-slavery patrols off the coast of Africa, intercepting slave ships from other nations. This not only disrupted the slave trade, but also reinforced Britain's naval supremacy. Plus, by positioning itself as the leader of the abolitionist movement, Britain gained international prestige and moral authority, which helped justify its imperial ambitions. So, abolition wasn't just about doing the right thing, it was also a strategic move to strengthen Britain's global power. Now, let us look at what was happening at home. Because while economics and geopolitics played a big role, the fight against slavery was also deeply personal for many Britons. Figures like William Wilberforce, Thomas Clarkson, and Olaudah Equiano led powerful campaigns to raise awareness about the horrors of slavery. They used petitions, pamphlets, and public lectures to sway public opinion. And it worked. By the early 19th century, millions of Britons had signed petitions calling for abolition. But it wasn't just about public pressure. The British government knew it had to act. With growing public outrage and the memory of events like the French Revolution fresh in their minds, they could not risk a potential uprising. Abolishing slavery wasn't just the right thing to do. It was a way to protect political stability. So in 1807, Britain passed the Slave Trade Act, abolishing the transatlantic slave trade. Then, in 1833, the Slavery Abolition Act freed enslaved people across most of the British Empire. These victories were the result of decades of political effort and public pressure. Finally, we cannot talk about abolition without discussing religion. For many Britons, the fight against slavery was a moral and spiritual crusade. The Quakers were among the first to condemn slavery as a sin. They argued that all humans were equal in the eyes of God, and their activism inspired broader abolitionist movements. Evangelical leaders like John Wesley and William Wilberforce framed abolition as a Christian duty. They believed that ending slavery was essential to achieving moral and social reform. And let us not forget, the late 18th and early 19th centuries saw a wave of religious revivalism in Britain. This awakening emphasized personal morality and social justice, making abolition a natural cause for many Christians. In short, religion provided the moral foundation for abolition, turning it into a sacred mission for many Britons. Britain's abolition of slavery didn't just change its own society, it had a global impact. Britain used its diplomatic and naval power to pressure other nations to abolish slavery. Treaties, like the Webster-Ashburton Treaty with the United States, and the Brussels Conference Act helped suppress the global slave trade. As the largest colonial power, Britain's abolition set a precedent for other empires. By the late 19th century, most of the world had formally abolished slavery. And Britain's role in ending slavery shaped its national identity and influenced future human rights movements. In many ways, the world is slave-free today because of Britain's leadership in the abolitionist movement. So why was slavery abolished? In Britain's case, it was a combination of economic shifts, geopolitical strategy, political activism, and religious conviction. But abolition wasn't just about Britain, it was a global struggle for justice and human dignity. The fight against slavery reminds us that progress is possible, even in the face of immense challenges. As we reflect on this history, let us remember that the fight for freedom and equality is never truly over. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do not forget to like, subscribe, and share. Let us keep the conversation going in the comments below. See you next time.